Carl and Susan and Robert. I haven't seen Carrie.
Carrie's the only member that I see missing. I
Didn't see Dan Cody either, but if Dan's here, that's fine.
I do see Dan Cody signed in on the line, yes. So,
Yep, I'm here. Try
so I have-
scrolling the view of the people. You can scroll.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, let's call this meeting to order then at 6:30. We do have a quorum, so we can proceed to do business. The first item of which are the minutes of September 14th, 2020.
Move approval. This is Susan.
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll take the second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes?
Mm-mm.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes of September 14th are approved. Sean, should we just proceed in order of these agenda items? I see there are other people present. I'm not sure if they're all here for the same things or if they're here for different things.
I do have a couple people here for the next several agenda items for
Okay.
both, or for Middleton Center, Scooter's Coffee, and the Parmenter Street reconstruction. So I think these next three, if we go in order, will be
All right.
doing all right.
All right, then let's just go to item number 2, which is Parmenter Street, Elmwood Avenue, and Aurora reconstruction design. Sean, you want to give us an overview of this one, please?
Sure. The committee will remember that last year we decided to defer for a year the construction of the project as requested by the business community, and there were a couple of reasons for that. A big one being that with Middleton Center Phase 3 under construction, at the same time we were contemplating the road reconstruction, the business community may suffer a lack of traffic, both auto traffic and foot traffic. But there was another rationale introduced, which was that at the same time, we would be closing the driveway to the buildings of, to the Phase 1 buildings, which have their sole driveway off of Parmenter Street. There really wouldn't be any place else for those folks to park. And so Terrence Wall, the developer, suggested that if he could get his Phase 3 buildings done first, by the time we do the road reconstruction project, the Phase 1 tenants could move into the all but vacant Phase 3 underground parking. Now, with the COVID pandemic from this spring here and through summer and now into fall, obviously business traffic has already suffered a lot. I think the big question now is what's our preferred timing for this project? And there were a couple of options that are laid out in the memo from Sean Alsrud with input from Tom Stetzer of Strand Associates, both of whom are on the line here in the meeting, which are to stay with our current schedule and build this next spring, or defer it for another year and shoot for a 2022 construction schedule. And so in the memo, we just laid out what we think some advantages and disadvantages of those options are, but to gauge a committee recommendation for council deliberation. Did you want to go to the memo?
It might not be a bad idea to look at those options if the committee wants to do that.
On another reason that you all mentioned was the fact that he's going to have heavy traffic on that road. And if we did it as originally scheduled, it would be damaged, and he threatened not to pay for the damage.
Oh, I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that's going to be
Stronger than all of his other concerns.
and that's going to be done, in spring, regardless of whether we defer the project another year or not. My first thought is this comes. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Do we have confirmation from that on T-Wall?
We have heard that, and I think the contractor's also on the line. Trevor Caulfield and Keith are both on the line involved in that project, but that's the last I heard was that in spring that should be finishing up.
Sean, this is Keith from Stevens. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, that is correct. We'll be done in sometime in May with phase 3 of Middleton Center.
All right. Yeah.
It will be complete in May.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ready for people to move in.
Correct.
Okay.
So I think, you know, one thing is we've still got this pandemic that we're dealing with. And from what I'm hearing, it seems likely we're going to be dealing with that through winter and into next spring. So I would almost lean towards sticking with a spring construction just because traffic may be down anyway. But when traffic does rebound, and that's a bit of a bet, what we don't want to do is immediately tear the road apart, I think. Or wait until the phase 3 buildings are leased out and then phase 1 tenants have no place to park.
Sean and Bob, this is Kathy Olson. I reached out to the Downtown Middleton Business Association and they pulled their membership. And I talked to the president, Andrew Van Ness, this afternoon. And if possible, they would like to see phase, the option number 3. Just plan on going forward with it for next year, but it would be nice just to have that little extra check-in. But they are in favor of having it completed next year if you could do it earlier in the springtime too. So.
Okay, good to know,
Like
thanks.
that little extra check-in wouldn't be the worst thing for them, because I said something about checking back in December or early January just to see where the pandemic is. So.
Yeah, as I read it, we don't have to make the decision today. It looks like it could be deferred till December. So what is the harm in just waiting to make the decision, choosing option 3?
Yeah, option 3 is essentially a springboard from option 1. Option 1
Yeah.
is let's finish the design and get the thing bid and then build it. Option 3 is almost the same thing, but before putting it out for bid, let's check back in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does
Sean?
it disrupt things much, Sean, if you wait a couple months before you've got the final plans, final process in place to do the bidding?
I think we would be wise to actually get ourselves ready to bid it, so that we would want to start back up now and get it ready to go, so that when a decision is made, we can actually get it out to bid.
Sean, as the non-engineer on this committee, but a microbiologist, I would recommend option 3, and even with that, a lot more flexibility. I think it's very optimistic to think that the pandemic will be over even next fall, probably.
Wow.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but
What kind of optimist are you, Susan?
I am being realistic based on my years of training in infectious diseases. And unless we can all start wearing masks and somehow get a vaccine approved and manufactured and convince everybody to take it, it's going to be a long time.
Susan,
Yes.
I don't think it's a problem constructing it during a pandemic. I mean, we've been doing construction. There's construction going on all
Oh,
over.
I have no problem with construction.
Yeah.
I think it's with the downtown businesses and how they're doing financially.
Yeah,
And that
but
would be,
that's why doing it this spring would be the best bet, I think.
Don't disrupt another season.
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So I would let them have a lot of input on it. I just want to make it clear, wishful thinking that the pandemic's going to be over soon is probably wishful thinking.
This is Kathy. They said in 2022, if the pandemic's over, they don't want to have everything torn up. They'd like to get rolling and not have another disruption.
So it
Okay.
sounds like
So-
we have some type of
motion.
emotion here, which it sounds like everybody likes 1 or 3, and 3 is the same as 1, only with a little bit of
Leeway.
added leeway.
Yes.
So I would make the motion to propose that we approve item number 3, or not item number 3, proposal number 3.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
I'll second
Right.
that.
Who seconded it, Dan?
Dan?
Dan, yes.
We have a motion and a second then. Is there any further discussion on this issue?
I just had one question. Has the pandemic, do we foresee that there'll be a surge of construction demand, or is there a shortage of manpower or anything like that that might affect this when we try to go forward with it? Or is stuff kind of rolling along?
I don't know enough about how that may affect us coming out of winter, because it depends a lot how winter ends up shaping up illness-wise.
Mhm.
I can say this year, when almost everything was shut down, the road contractors were looking for early work. They wanted to get back at it.
Mhm.
And,
Okay.
we got a lot done early this year.
Further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried. And then this, Sean, is what will be recommended to the council.
Right, yep.
Okay.
Before we get off this subject, can we ask Tom if he has any issues with getting this done this fall?
Sure thing, Don. Tom Stetzer here from Strand Associates, the project manager on the project, and no issues from my end. I think we were kind of ramping up design here this fall, and kind of we're at about the 85% level, I would say, plus or minus. And we just wanted a little bit of clarity on should we keep charging ahead and get this thing buttoned up and ready for bidding, or if the committee and council felt strongly that it needed to be delayed for a specific reason, then from an efficiency standpoint, we were, just gonna, kind of shut down the project and close our internal project numbers, for example. But no, this plan sounds great to me.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Next
right.
item.
Well, that sounds good. Thanks, Tom, and Sean Elzard, if you're still with us, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So next on our agenda is Middleton Center Phase 3, request to abandon some steel piles in the right-of-way. And we had a lot in our packets in terms of design drawings and actual survey follow-up. Let me just zoom that down a little bit. And so the earth retention at Middleton Center Phase 3 was designed, at least along the road rights of way, as soldier piles. So these H-shaped piles were driven vertically into the ground, and then boards are put between them, if that makes sense to everybody.
Mhm.
They were installed relatively near the property lines. Unfortunately, that's also fairly near where there's a significant ATC underground transmission line. I think those are 69 kilovolt lines that are oil-filled pipes, essentially, that carry that electricity along Terrace Avenue. And then along Parmenter Street, there's a gas main. And so the request was, to just allow those piles, the steel vertical piles, to be abandoned in place. I think especially near the 69 kV line, I'm sympathetic to a change in plans. Ordinarily, we wouldn't allow such things to be abandoned in place. And here I think there's the potential to cause more damage from a small mistake than there is to just leave it where it is and put a sidewalk on top of it and let it be. Along the gas main, along Parmenter Street, I know that's part of the request, and Trevor is here, as is Keith. in support of a request to let those in too. I didn't include that in my recommendation to the committee. I think there's a better potential to get those taken back out and keep the gas line where it is and let MG&E excavate to it for future repairs without steel piles in their way. So that's the nuts and bolts of the issue. If you want to go to any of the drawings, we certainly can. They did a really nice job documenting what's where, what elevation they're installed at.
Could you explain what the tieback is?
Yeah, we don't have tiebacks in the road right-of-way. There's along the railroad right-of-way some tiebacks, but those are essentially horizontal steel, and they were installed for the excavation retention along Hubbard Avenue with phase 1.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, no, they weren't. They weren't either. They were proposed that way, but they would have crossed utility lines, and we didn't want to be snagging those every time we tried digging something up to repair it. So we left those out of phase 1.
Sean, this is Robert. Can we look at some of the drawings? Because I looked at them and I wasn't sure that I was understanding
Sure.
which. Yeah, I saw. Yeah, I'm trying to understand. I was actually surprised that they ever take the pilot these things out.
Okay.
But when you explain how they get in the way of other underground items, I'm hesitant to allow these things to stay in place in every location. But
Yeah.
I do want to help. I do want to understand it better so that I can make a good decision.
Sure. So I'm going to start with a cross-section drawing. If we, take a knife and cut a line through the earth and take a look at it sideways. So, when you look at a piece of road, curb and gutter, slope, this is the steel pile that's driven vertically down into the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it supports this road from falling into the hole that's being dug for the foundation. So they're pouring a foundation and a wall for the underground parking, and up here is a sidewalk. Again, when we're looking at it sideways.
Mm-hmm.
And the ATC lines really are roughly here below the sidewalk edge towards the street side. And then we've got these steel piles driven, I don't know, every 15 feet, 10 feet, something like that, more or less along the property line. And then between those steel piles, they put a bunch of timber boards to hold the earth back. So
The timber's all removed, correct?
The timbers will all be removed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, well, trying to get these steel piles pulled back out of the earth without wrecking this ATC line is a challenge. I'll say it that way. And so the proposal was, well, could we just leave these things here? And some of them are a little bit further up than they're shown in this design drawing relative to the ATC line. But even if they were cut off here, they'd be about 3 feet below the sidewalk, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, could I jump in for a minute or two here?
This is a good time.
Yeah, so I guess typically in other municipalities, they'll allow us to leave these in place. And just with the proximity of the ATC lines and the gas lines, it's not ideal to try to even attempt to pull these out. These piles are 40 feet in length, and basically, if we had to pull them out, it's going to create some settlements around adjacent underground utilities, and have the potential to create some pretty significant issues with the ATC lines and the gas line for that matter. So I guess what we'd be kind of proposing is to cut these things off below grade, between 3 and 4 feet below grade, and leaving them in place. It's typical for what Madison or Milwaukee would allow us to do. I've had some experiences pulling smaller piles out, and it's created some settlement issues that would raise some concerns. If we were, I mean, this is a perfect picture to look at this cross section. You can imagine we're holding back the earth between the piling and the street. If we try to pull that out, that, you know, where the material between the back of the curb and the piling's got to go somewhere, and it's going to collapse is what's going to happen. It's going to move, and it could potentially create some issues that would not be ideal, I guess. So I guess that's kind of our lobby, is that are we able to cut these things off and leave them in place.
Can I ask you a question, Keith? I thought I read
Yep.
somewhere in the paperwork that the original agreement when you put them in was that they were going to be taken out. So how did that take place? Does anybody recall where that text was? It might have been in a summary.
Let me look for that. I think it was an email. I don't know
This is Trevor.
Okay,
Can you guys hear me? This is Trevor Poffeld from Terra.
Yeah.
Hey, so just I kind of got brought in midway through this project as we were installing the earth retention. And my understanding is that the issue was the ATC line was not installed where it was shown per plan. It's actually closer to the job site, to our earth retention wall, than it was shown on drawings. It was supposed to have been closer towards the roadside, and it's actually more towards the building side. So the issue is, since that ATC line is over probably about 18 inches or so, Keith, I can't remember what that number was exactly. It's that much closer to our wall, which made it, you know, in some areas, you know, less than 12 inches away from our proposed earth retention. That's the real issue, is this ATC line has ended up being a lot closer to the proposed property line than originally anticipated during the original design.
Can I ask how you remove the timbers without having a settlement problem?
So the timbers stay in place. That's standard. It's just standard oak boards. Those rot over time. The issue isn't the lagging getting removed. The issue is the beams themselves. So if you picture a 14-inch beam, as you're pulling it out of the ground, you're essentially creating a void, a space where that beam was. And as you vibrate that beam, you're essentially consolidating or compacting that material to fill that void. And that's where you get the pretty high risk in this instance of settlement of that ATC line and gas line in that area.
Oh, I know how that's done. I was just curious, you're not removing the timbers then, is that correct?
The timbers would be removed within that top 3 to 4 feet where the soldier piles would be left in place. Otherwise, they get left in place. That's pretty standard, industry standard for this.
Oh,
Okay.
I had not been told that either. And I see I didn't include in the packets the actual email from Terra Construction that this would all be removed. I think I just included a note about that email in my memo.
Yeah, I need to explain how you could promise it and then retract from that. I understand if something changed location, that might make sense for some of the piles.
So
we
I think that's the impetus for all this is I think the ATC line runs parallel for the full length of the project for buildings F and G, and it's over for that total length. It's closer to than anticipated, is my understanding, from when it was originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess
just
another
highlight
point
that
is that I guess
let me just highlight.
I was just going to say that
quote,
Trevor and I kind of came in after the original agreement was after T-Wall kind of got the original approval. I guess we weren't necessarily really that involved with the earlier approval.
Okay. So
And the only other thing to bring up on Terra's end, the equipment used to install the beams is a state-of-the-art high frequency, low amplitude vibratory hammer to negate any or minimize vibrations into the ground or adjacent properties or disturbance of neighbors. And from previous phases out there, we had used another hammer that I've heard that neighbors had complained about the noise and vibrations from the previous phases. I don't believe we've had that with this phase, but the issue is being that in order to use that high-tech equipment, you need to be able to be right up on that beam within the excavation. And the fact is, we literally can't reach the beams from the road with this equipment. We'd have to go back to be using the more lower frequency, higher amplitude vibratory hammer, which may be a little bit of annoyance to neighbors or adjacent property owners.
So let me jump in the middle of the screen here. This one sentence in quote was directly lifted from a Terra email. I didn't put the whole email into the packet, but that didn't come from me. And the request that I had was to leave the steel piles in the right-of-way. So I was unaware that there was also a proposal to leave many of the timbers in the right-of-way. That wasn't what was asked of me. So it's not included in my memo here.
Sean, did we have this problem on phase one?
I believe that was
They
all.
put the piles and timbers in.
I think that was all removed.
What does ATC say? Anything?
I haven't heard from them. Did Trevor or Keith, you contact ATC?
Yeah, we've been dealing with them all along. We had their watchdog out there basically full time while we were putting these in. So Brian Schilling is the contact over there. I'm sure I can loop him and Sean unless you know Brian, I can start a conversation with Brian if needed.
I don't. I just know that I had asked for a survey and a memo, and I got a really good survey.
And what about MG&E? Have we talked to them? Do they have an opinion?
I have not heard from them. And again, I was expecting that if we were pulling this steel away from their gas line, that's a longer, more robust facility that they can hold a little bit at a time if they need to. So I haven't heard from them, no.
Okay.
Sean, I'm meeting John Wickern with MG&E Gas out on site on Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. We can definitely review with him as well, or I can talk to him.
Yeah, you might want to send him the survey first. It seems to me that along Parmenter Street, maybe only the northerly half of the piles are in the right-of-way. The southerly half, I think, are on site. Let me just scroll down there for a bit, but that was my recollection anyway.
Who assumes future liability for anything in the public right-of-way left behind? Is that something does that get put on the deed or something like that, where they maintain the responsibility for that, or does the city absorb it?
I think the city does, because I don't think there is any they. Unless somehow we get an agreement from the land owner,
It ends up being an encroachment of private, infrastructure into a city right-of-way.
And that probably is an option. They do. I know TUAL does have an agreement with the Wisconsin DOT to leave the piling on the north side of the site in the DOT right-of-way.
While they maintain,
that could be an option.
While they maintain future liability.
I don't know how the language reads. That was something that they negotiated.
If it's difficult to get them out now, it's going to be a heck of a lot more difficult to get them out later if they have to come out. And then the
Correct.
city would be liable for that.
Well, and it's disruptive. And part of what I was thinking is Parmenter Street, I think we could clean up. Because as fiber optic companies come through, they tend to want to be over near the right-of-way edge.
Yeah.
On Terrace Avenue, I think there's a good enough risk of damaging something really expensive. But on Parmenter Street, I think there's an opportunity to do what was intended and get that clean.
Sean, the sentence from the email that you had on the screen a short time ago that in effect promised to pull these out when they were finished, that was from T-Wall?
No, that was from Terra, the subcontractor that does the earth retention.
Okay.
So
And Tara's not asking to leave them in place. It's T-Wall that's asking to leave them in place.
Well, it's a combination really of
all parties.
Terra, Stevens, and T-Wall.
Okay.
So this is Robert. Help me understand. It sounds like they're planning on, even if they leave some of these or all of these in place, they go down about 4 feet to cut them off and remove the boards down to the wood oak boards down to that 4 foot depth.
Mhm.
Anything below 4 feet is where the piling and the oak would be. So for people running fiber optic cable, for people dealing with gas utilities, how deep do they go?
Well, that varies. I think most of those sort of telephone and gas and electric are general in the upper 3 feet-ish, I would say. When we get into water and sewer, that's when we're 6, 7 feet down, sometimes deeper.
Sure.
So it seems more likely that when we have to go, let's say that we need to bring in a new sewer service along from the road through this wall and into the building, right? It has to go through the oak boards, down to as deep as that sewer is going to be. Ideally without hitting any steel.
And just to jump in again, it is industry standard in the local municipalities that this material does get left in place, and it's generally top 4 feet gets removed. And we do this all over the state. We do it in Minnesota. We do it in Illinois. We're not asking for anything that's not common. Just for some reference in other construction municipalities, and we can look up other projects where we've done that. That helps you. The oak boards are easily drilled through by contractors. The steel beams are easily cut off if they are exposed and need to be removed. So just to give you a little frame of reference, it's not uncommon that these are left in place. It's actually more common so that they are, just because it is such a difficulty in the end coming back and trying to remove everything and not settling stuff around you once everything's built around it.
And I think that's a fair point. Thanks for adding that, Trevor, that it's not insurmountable. If somebody has to go through this wall or through this steel, it can be done. They might not be set up to do it at the time that they want to bring something in, so they may just have to, spend some time getting a torch to go cut off the steel that they just didn't bring with them because they didn't know what was there. I think as far as how frequent it is elsewhere, that's nice to know. Here in Middleton, we have not approved abandonment of things in the right-of-way other than some utility lines, but not foundation or earth retention systems.
I think we should take a look at whatever the agreement is on the other portion of the property or whatever with DOT regarding the assumption of future liability for this stuff.
I would like to hear from Terra and company what if we did say along Terrace is fine, but you do have to remove everything along Parmenter? What does that entail? What does that look like to your companies?
Yeah, that's a
I
small
think that'd be
fraction.
something Stevens and I would have to, Stevens and Tara and Seawall would have to look at. And I know right now, access to some of those would be, we'd probably have to shut down Parmenter at a minimum for at least a day or 2 days in order to bring equipment in there to be able to try to reach those beams to pull them out if possible. I think we'd have to sit down as a team and look at that.
One, you also, I mean, yeah, it might take 2 days and it might be possible, but we're also risking some settlement that could happen with adjacent utilities and the road and sidewalk and stuff that would not look great.
What if
Yeah,
in lieu of
just a
that, you cut
reminder
it
of
off to negative 10 feet instead of 40 feet? Instead of shaking it and pulling it, just cut it off. If it's something somebody else may someday have to do, could you do it now?
Cut it, are you saying cut it off at 10 feet?
Yeah.
You can't, because then you're holding back the earth. You'd be in a confined space. There's only 3 feet roughly between the wood lagging and the foundation wall.
You can't safely put anyone in front of that wall and remove and cut it that low. Otherwise, like Keith was saying, everything you're holding back would fall in on that person doing the cutting.
So it may be more difficult in the future for someone to do it safely too.
Well, no, at that time, everything will be backfilled. So it's not retaining. So as Stevens backfills between our earth retention and their building, they're putting stone between that. So at that point, our earth retention isn't doing anything anymore. It's not retaining anything. So if it needs to be cut out or removed in the future, it's served its purpose. It's not holding out any earth back anymore at that point because it's been backfilled on both sides.
You still have to dig clearance to get at it, so you're going to have a cave-in issue when you try to cut this below grade in the future.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is you'd have to excavate on both sides before cutting it off.
Yeah, if you wanted to go further than 3 or 4 feet or wherever it's at right now.
So how many are there along Parmenter? Because I feel like this is what we were told as a city that would happen. And
So this green line is the property line. So all of these little I-beam shaped things are pretty much on private property, and then they start getting out into the right of way. So
and we only care about the ones in the public right of way.
5 or 6. Yeah, that's all we would care about. Once it's onto private property, that's not our concern.
Because we're no longer liable. Yeah.
As you look at that drawing, I just want to point out how close they are encroaching upon that gas line that's there. And again, it's not the same type of equipment, unfortunately, pulling them out that it was putting them in.
Yeah. So it's a good conversation for you to have with the gas company. I mean, I don't know if they can hold or relocate or what they have to do to stabilize that. In the big picture, while you're used to putting these things in and leaving them there, we were told you were going to put them in and take them back out.
Yeah, I can't comment on that, Sean. I wasn't. I'd have to get Scott Zimmerman involved with and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to look into that and what the context of that statement was originally as well.
Well, I would also be interested in hearing how your discussion goes on Wednesday, was it? Because I right now I'm not all that persuaded to leave in the ones on Parmenter that are in the right of way. Maybe I can be swayed with more information, but based on the information I have now, I would rather get those 6 removed.
And I was able to, I've been texting Scott here. And part of that statement, he said, when we put this design together or in talks with the people involved with the project, we were told that the ATC line, like I said, was further away. And we were also told that the ATC line was in a concrete duct, which it was not in concrete duct. It was just buried in dirt.
But the ATC line does not go along Parmenter, does it?
No.
So I think I'm swayed on Terrace Avenue where the ATC lines are. So you've won that battle. Let's talk about Parmenter and why those 6 pilings that are going to possibly be interfering with any future sewer work, for instance, that we need to do in this area, why we should just agree to leave them there. That's not ATC.
That's not
an ATC issue.
What type of sewer work would you have in this area? I mean, your sewer runs down the middle of the street typically, doesn't it? Just in general, right?
I think it would be more likely that it would be fiber or telephone or somebody else that wants to hug the right-of-way line with an underground horizontal directional drill.
How many
Sure.
how many pilings are left on Terrace Avenue in the public right of way? There's a lot of them along the road.
Sorry.
Quite a few. Yeah.
All of them. So it looks like it's 60 of them or 50 of them or something like that.
Probably in that.
They're not
ballpark.
they're not all in the right of way.
How do I
There's
tell?
a number of them.
Yeah.
I think the green line is the property line.
Yeah.
That's what we're hearing, right?
Oh, so there's some that are, a lot of those are on the.
Right on the edge.
Yeah, they're right on the edge. Okay.
Right.
They're all right on the edge.
So some of them just straddle, but it's not a huge thing. I mean, it would be enough that if we could map these and tie it to our record drawings someplace, that we could at least advise a future utility company, don't bother trying to hug the right-of-way line if you're installing something here. Get out into the right-of-way someplace instead, or go in the south terrace, not the north one.
Sure. I think I think we're in agreement on, for the most part. I hear a lot of agreement on what we do on Terrace. I'm just still struggling a little bit with the ones, and I thank you for pointing out that it's not sewer work that's probably going to run into these things. It would be potentially something more like fiber optic, which may be above where they're cut off anyway. If fiber optic is 3 feet down and they cut these things off at 4 feet, maybe this isn't a big issue. But I just feel like I need a little bit more information before we just agree to this.
Sean, what about the issue that you raised with the situation between building, whatever they are, F and G?
Sure.
Also regarding sewer and water?
Well, and that's almost where I ended up panning here anyway, is, we've got water and storm sewer and sanitary sewer running between these 2 buildings. So all I'm asking there is within those easement areas, within 15 feet of where those pipes are centered, to get those piles out. Because when we dig, we have to dig deep and on really short notice. So.
Well, and Sean, the other issue right there is that sanitary is probably 40 or 50 years old.
Yeah.
I think it's clay, correct? We've
think
already
so.
had some recent issues with it. I'd be concerned with that specific area as well, pulling those out and creating further issues with that sanitary.
And it might already be compromised. And if it has to get rebuilt, now's the better time to do that. When we have a problem, I cannot have a crew and a backhoe looking
Sure.
around for a torch. I can't do that.
How deep is that? Do you know how deep that sanitary is?
Not offhand, no.
Sean, do we
Okay, so
really
it's
have
basically
enough?
from this.
Yeah, it looks like there's just a couple piles there that on one side and a few on the other. Okay.
Yeah, it's maybe 4 over here-ish, and then up along the tracks,
There's a couple along the tracks. Yeah.
some more.
Sean,
So
I'm
those
getting the
ones that
sense we
are in
need
a
more.
diagonal,
Oh, hold
Go
on a
ahead.
second, Trevor. Susan's asking a
Yep.
question.
I'm getting concerned that we simply need a whole lot more information from multiple different sources before we can make a decision tonight. And not being an engineer, I'm not sure, but I would love to know what MG&E thinks about this whole thing.
And MG&E is one input, right?
And there's some others
future
too, but-
utilities may have some concerns, and again, it is city
Yeah.
right of way, so.
ATC, I feel like we need more information.
Is there any, I mean, there's not an urgent time element in terms of getting these pilings out or cut off or whatever, is there? At this point?
We need to backfill along Terrace Avenue. We need to keep backfilling so we can build the building. We have the foundations in on the one building, and we need to get backfilled out there as soon as possible.
Well, I can appreciate that, but
Which-
you backfill and that takes care of your problem, but then the future problems that are left with all of this are going to be the cities to resolve.
Correct. Well, I'm sorry. So the area where we have the piles that are basically from this utility easement down to the corner, I think are all okay. Are we in agreement with that? And then it's just really it's the Terrace Ave or the Parmenter Street, and then the ones in the easement that we have to worry about.
Well, I don't know, is that I thought we wanted to get some more input from ATC to see what they think about this as well. Because they have, maintenance responsibilities that they have on this stuff also. And once everything's done and you guys are packed up and gone away, the problems that ensue fall back in the city's lap.
Yeah, unless we can we can put a legal agreement together that assigns the responsibility to the building or the contractor, and then if they want to assign that agreement to the property when the property's sold, they can do that.
Personally, I think that's an avenue that we ought to be exploring vigorously.
Yeah, these are going to be there for 100 years or more.
Should we consider then, for purposes of keeping construction moving along Terrace Avenue and pushing off to a future agenda, reconsideration along Parmenter Street, or at least the northerly ones along Parmenter Street, approving essentially, as had been recommended by me, to allow abandonment at some cutoff elevation, the ones along Terrace Avenue, removal of the ones from within the utility easement or zone of influence, and removing the ones along Parmenter Street as the default position, so that in the future, if the committee is convinced to reverse that decision, at least there will be a decision in place in the meantime.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, Sean. I think actually leaving those in there might be a benefit to ATC if they ever had to get in and service that 69 kV line because they've got sheeting on one side, or at least a way to put easy sheeting in.
Yeah, I think the concrete foundation wall also serves that purpose, but sure.
Definitely, but I mean, you know, it's yeah, one would hope they don't have to dig around all those I-beams to get their trench, but if they're only down 4 or 5 feet, then they're probably okay with what's left. But I agree, on Parmenter Street, those should be removed, the ones that are out in the right of way, because that's the main street in the city essentially, and who knows what's going to go in there in the future in that right of way.
Sean, would you like some 2 cents to this discussion? This is Gary.
Now is as good a time as any.
One thing you might consider is for any pilings that are allowed to remain, that they be cut off to a deeper level than merely the 3 or 4 feet, something between 6 and 8 perhaps. That will keep them well clear of the vast majority of future utility installations. The reason we care about what happens to fiber optic is because if they can't go where they want to, that leaves them moving further out into the right of way, possibly interfering with our facilities. Just some food for thought.
Sure. I had previously picked 10 and that was unsafe. And I don't know if 8 is or 6 is, but it may not.
So OSHA is 48 inches is OSHA.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be able to do anything deeper than that.
Okay.
You mean without some kind of safeguards? Like a portable temporary backhoe in place with a plate that could hold the wall up while that excavation is going on, correct?
Yeah, but in order to do that, now you're going to have to literally undermine those ATC lines to get down to that depth to cut them off.
Oh,
if you want to try to use a trench box or a road plate or anything like that.
I think, again, we're talking about Parmenter Street here, though.
Oh, Parmenter Street. Yeah, we can't physically put anyone in that hole unless there is some type of design system or trench box, and you have to have room in order to install that. And with that gas line there, I don't know if that's even an option to be able to get the excavation wide enough to install some type of retention.
So to kind of move forward tonight, I would make the proposal that we allow the ones that are on terrace to remain, except for if there's 1 or 2 that need to be removed near, 1 or 2 or 3, whatever, that need to be removed, near that easement in between the 2 buildings. And then we require, as of today, we require that the 6 or so along Parmenter be pulled out. And if they want to come back at a future meeting and with more information from all the parties involved as to the hazards and dangers of pulling them out, we can talk about that at a future date as well.
I think, Robert, the easier way to do it, because I don't think you said anything differently than what Sean's proposing in his memo, is just to say, let's make a motion to do what Sean's proposing in his memo.
Well, that would be more clear, sure. Let's do that.
There you go.
I guess before you, this is just Trevor from Terra again. My one input before you make a motion, I'd like to talk to ATC because there is that one along Terrace Avenue within the easement that they're asking us to remove. We'd have to get some sign off from ATC or someone else before we'd be willing to try to do anything like that, since it's not in a concrete duct like we were led to believe. Sure. And it's over closer to the beams than what we were led to believe as well before we agreed.
Okay, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we just say We make an motion to follow the recommendations in Sean's memo, except that we would like ATC to approve the solution on Terrace Avenue.
Well, the downside is you don't want to give ATC the veto power of a city decision.
Right. So I mean, if we stick with
If they want to come back and convince us, like Robert,
Right.
I'm open to that.
right, I think that's the cleanest solution, and I understand what Trevor's saying, but we have to make a decision tonight. We can hem and haw over this for the next 2 hours, and I don't think we're going to get any closer to the to a resolution. So if we say right now, let's go with the proposal that Sean Stowski recommended. It gives you clear marching orders, Trevor and Keith, but it also gives you a chance to say, well, that's what the city's saying now. Come back to us with more information, and we may be willing to change our mind, but as of today, I think we're giving you some pretty clear direction as to where the city stands on this.
You can always come back to us with a proposal to assume future liability for all of this stuff so that the city is not left on the hook for it. That is, in effect, your initial proposal or the initial understanding was that you were going to remove all of this stuff at the end of the project or at the appropriate point in the project. And you now want to change that, and I understand you have reasons for wanting to change that, but that solves your problem, but it doesn't solve the long-term problem of the city and others who at some point are going to have to assume the liability for this. So maybe an agreement for assuming the liability for deviating from your original plan is a viable alternative also.
Can we supplement our motion with that, to be including that statement that a liability is resolved?
Well, I'm not sure who made the motion at this point. Carl, you made the motion?
I think
The motion is.
I think with just
we-
these three items, we would be, as a city, taking the liability for whatever's along Terrace.
Right.
And that's all that right now is being allowed by the committee. Things in the easement and along Parmenter go away. Now, if a future proposal is different, that's fine.
You're somewhat comfortable with Terrace Avenue? The
I think
pilings that are basically on the border?
I am.
Okay.
I think they're close enough to either being on private property or just straddling into the terrace that we can map that and track that.
Okay.
And we shouldn't be permitting folks to put stuff within 6 inches of a property line anyway.
Okay.
Who'd want to do that?
Apparently we did.
So I'm not as concerned by that, and I think there's a really valid concern with trying to mess with that at this point.
Okay. In that case, I'll second the motion we have on the table, which is basically follows the original solution proposed by Sean.
And we don't wish to explore any further the possibility of them assuming the liability for future.
I don't think they can tonight.
I
So
don't think they can tonight.
I think they have to remove everything that we're concerned about at this point, unless they come back. So
I think to your point, Bob, that's always on the table, but it's not really on the table tonight. It's if they want to propose something else in the future that says we leave them in, but so-and-so group will come back if the city ever needs us to and take care of this, or we'll pay you your cost to deal with it, then we can address that issue at a future meeting.
All right, everybody comfortable with understanding the motion? We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will proceed thusly.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Right, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we've got up Scooter's Coffee, and I know some folks are with us tonight. The property owner, Jim Bowman's with us. Yep. As is, I thought I saw Adam Laborde. Yep, he's signed in. And Mike Michaelis still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. To talk about the Scooters Monument sign, which I'm sure most of you will remember, but the scales are kind of wildly different from page to page on this agenda, so hold on to your hats. The committee had most recently asked me to check in on the right-of-way ownership issue, and I contacted the county, which had jurisdictionally transferred University Avenue to us at the time of its reconstruction a few years ago. What I wasn't expecting was that the county said, no, this was all acquired by the state in 1933 as part of US Highways 12 and 14, so they retained ownership of the right-of-way. So then I contacted the state, and a consultant got back in touch with me shortly before I sent this agenda out, fortunately. But what she told me, as is typical of the state, is that their records from then are not perfect, and we've run into that before, but what they're willing to do is if the city declares right-of-way to be excess, they're willing to negotiate with the interested abutting property owner for its acquisition, but they'll only sell it without title search or title insurance. They'll sell it essentially via quitclaim. They'll quit their interest in it, but that doesn't mean somebody else isn't interested in it. So under those conditions, it could become private property with some utility easement over it, in which case then we could get back to the sign issue. The state consultant told me she couldn't give me a firm timeline, but she could tell me that it might take 6 months to a year to get through the process. She wouldn't offer a ballpark price. Other than that, as a starting point, they would look at comparable sales for comparable abutting property as their starting point, but that they consider other factors. So it would be a whole negotiation for setting that purchase. And that, in a nutshell, is what I found out.
So, Sean, does this now tell us that we don't really have the jurisdiction to give the approval for this sign because it's not in our right of way? Yeah.
The county said that they don't have any interest, but the state person I talked with was a consultant only for real estate. It would be somebody else I'd have to chat with about if under any conditions they could permit an encroachment in right-of-way that they have an interest in, even though they don't manage it or maintain it or operate on it. It's still, they've got an interest in it because they're the landowner effectively. Yeah. I do know, and I think I even cited in my memo, that there are a host of state statutes and one code of federal regulations that get into encroachments, signs specifically in state rights of way, and none of them are encouraging. So
it seems to me like we don't answer this question. That's my.
I don't think we do, at least not solely.
Yeah.
I would just be interested in asking Mr. Bowman, I think is still here, is he not?
Yes.
Given the other fact that came to light here, that being the apartment complex that was originally proposed due west of your property that you felt was going to be a big hindrance in terms of the view of your sign if it was placed on your property. Since that's apparently off the drawing board now, and there's a proposal for an auto parts store there instead, which I could not envision to be a 4-story massive building like the apartment complex was. Does this render the whole thing unnecessary because your lines of sight from that direction are not going to be blocked by a neighboring building? And you can just go ahead and put the sign on your property.
Well, I haven't seen the plan, so I don't know if they've got a monument sign plan for the 20 feet between their property and the sidewalk. Also, it would still be advantageous for us to get the sign closer to the road. So to answer your question, I think this is still a relevant issue for scooters.
Okay.
How's the current signage working for you? I think you still have the inflatable. Maybe.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like the city's. How do I want to say this? We're not fighting anybody right now over the inflatable or its location. And it sounds like a permanent monument sign may take 6 months to a year to pursue, and this group doesn't even have the authority right now to weigh in on this. I just want to make sure, we want to be supportive of what you guys are doing in trying to keep your business going and keep signage out to identify your business. And I just wanted to find out, how's that working for you right now?
Adam, are you on the line?
This is Emily. Until Adam comes in, I'm the alder for the district. I just talked to him maybe yesterday. The signage is very helpful. The inflatable. I went through the drive-through the other day with my son just to, get some coffee, give it a whirl. Where the inflatable is easier to see for signage purposes. Even with the Napa auto parts going in, even though it won't be so pulled forward, at least that's the plan for now, it would still be covering where the old sign is in my mind. Like there's those trees over there. It's really hard to see that far back. So the only reason I'm throwing this out there is that my understanding from Sean's letter is that we want to make sure that we are supporting our businesses, because if the state comes through and they do want to give us that authority, at least as the alder of this district supporting this business, I want to say I support him in this request. And I understand that is your area to consider, but that as we move forward collaboratively working with the state to find out where this is, I hope that you're open to continuing to support this business. And I appreciate your patience.
And thanks, Emily. This is Adam. Sorry, guys. I was had a couple of mute buttons I was hitting and they weren't working. So no, just to echo what Emily's saying. Yeah, the sign closer to the road and having it be kind of the professional monument sign where it's got lighting in it and everything. It definitely would make it more visible and stand out a lot better than the inflatable that we have right now. The inflatable right now is great. I mean, that gives some visibility to our business, but having the actual official monument sign that's a little bit larger as well, at least the logo of it and that it says coffee and everything would definitely help us. So that's why we want to pursue it. Continue to pursue it, I should say.
So this is Jim
I
again.
understand that, but I mean, I think to continue to pursue it, you're going to have to pursue it in another forum than in front of this committee, I think, because I don't believe we have the authority to grant a right of way on state property.
So this is Jim. Can I jump in here?
I think Robert, Bob, if you look at number 2 on Sean's memo on the bottom, I think it covers that pretty well. Recommend that to the Common Council that a portion of University Avenue right-of-way be declared excess so that the abutting property owner can purchase the right-of-way from the state and create a utility easement. And if that monument sign would encroach into the easement area, to enter it into an easement encroachment agreement with the city. I mean, that's really what we're saying, isn't it?
That would be the long-term cleanup of it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. And then
Yeah.
if it's declared excess, then the property owner has to negotiate with the state to purchase it. And assuming that gets done, then we have to get an easement for utilities to go through it.
So I'd like to add one more thing. From Sean's notes, he talks about the arrangement that was made when the Sonic property was developed. And they talked about declaring that 20 feet as could be a future right-of-way. So this wouldn't be an encumberment in the future. You could declare that little strip of land that we would acquire from the state as a future right-of-way as well.
Isn't that small strip of land like a discontinuity along the right-of-way? It actually is a thicker right-of-way in the area we're talked about, and then adjacent to it, it's much more narrow.
Yeah, Sean, do you have that diagram that I gave you?
I do. Let me try to share a different screen here, and bear with me. My computer is not quite as old as me, but it's getting there. Is that coming up for you all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a sketch that Jim shared with me earlier, just showing a base outline of the 2 sites, the scooter site and the former Sonic site, what will become Napa Auto Parts, we think. And with the proposed sign location that's out in what is currently right-of-way, but could really be squared off and pulled over in sort of a box shape. In fact, I had at one point created just an exhibit drawing to get to the state folks about sort of where we're talking about and what we're talking about, where you can kind of see this is the old Sonic canopy for their drive-up ordering. And down here on the bottom of the page is where the driveway into Scooter's Coffee is. I think this little white dot is the existing old Crandall sign probably. But this sort of yellow line is the current right-of-way. And then this orangish line would square that up to say, well, let's take this same width and just drag it down and pull it over so we could get a little bit of on-site land next to Scooter's property, if you will. I don't think anyone would want to try to create just a little bump of rectangle like that for the right-of-way.
Does that create a condition where we're going to add a little bit of land to Scooter's Coffee and a little bit of land to the future auto parts store? It looks like that yellow line up the property line between the 2 properties.
Right.
So is there actually going to be two little things affected there?
Most of this would be abutting Napa.
Yeah.
And then
okay. So Napa would have
tiny
to.
bit of it would be next to Scooter's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
the whole
both
thing's pretty small, but it is
businesses-
2 properties.
Yeah.
So both businesses would need to buy the land.
Buy the land.
Ideally, yes. Right.
That complicates it because there's another party involved.
And then this,
Could I just buy the little piece I need?
Well, that would make
You got a real convoluted.
a
map.
hardship for tracking right-of-way later to have just a little bump next to this other relatively small bump. Next to this I have, and I don't know if I can bring it up. Oh, I think it's on your screens probably. Oops, or was. Most of the right-of-way, let me zoom in on this a little. Oops, more. Huh. Doesn't seem to want to let me do that.
while you're looking for that, Sean, am I understanding correctly that the former Sonic site will be losing their bump out when it becomes Napa Auto Parts?
No.
They will continue to have that bump out.
Yeah, you can kind of see in highlighting
that.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
In highlighting, this is just a little bit of a narrowing of University Avenue. If you look up and down most of the corridor,
look at that.
There's these nice strong straight lines, but this is where it gets narrow. Next to the old Sonic and part of Guggen's Advisors, they have two parcels, but one development. And sort of the easterly half has narrow right-of-way, more site. And then the westerly half has more right-of-way, less site, if you will. But that's why when this was redeveloped into Sonic and they created a certified survey map and they moved the city's storm sewer to go around their building, they created this certified survey map and said, I think the city at the time was pursuing a dedication of this as right-of-way. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the certified survey map was recorded, and presumably as a city policy decision item, we agreed that that would be listed just as 20 feet of future right-of-way. And frankly, I don't think we're contemplating extra lanes here anytime soon. And by anytime soon, that's probably very long term. So it's not that we need all of this right-of-way or are trying to expand the right-of-way. To some degree, I don't know that it matters if we add on to that bump by bringing it a little bit further to the east. And I apologize, I've rotated this whole thing to fit it. But you know, if this bump were to be extended, I don't think that's the end of anybody's world, whether that's then future right-of-way or not. It would be one way to resolve the desire to take the sign from here and move it here, if that makes sense. But other than that, I think that this is pretty wide right-of-way. It's well out into the grass. If you drive up and down the corridor, you'll notice that a lot of these signs are pretty far away from the curb. I think if we say, yeah, let's take this one sign and move it out closer to the curb, even though it's in public right-of-way, my phone's going to start ringing and your agendas are going to get full with folks who would prefer that their sign be closer to the street. But that's the bump that we're looking at.
Again, Sean, we can't even do that if it's a state right-of-way, can we?
We can't alone do that. No, we could support it. And I think the state is amenable to that.
Okay.
You know, but the state would have to be the ones leading the sale to make it private property. I haven't asked, but I doubt that the state would permit an encroachment. In fact, when this was reconstructed, the county ordered the relocation of several things that were encroachments at the time.
Isn't the state going to be pretty tough on giving up any right-of-way?
I don't think so. I mean, this hasn't been used as a state road per se for a really long time. And it is still on the national highway system, but that's just a linkage consideration, not a jurisdictional ownership kind of consideration.
It seems like that whole jog is a narrowing of the right of way. The majority of it is wider. I thought it was the reverse of that.
Yeah, no, this is, if you look at Dane County's mapping, DCI map is a really good tool. It's pretty clear that east of Branch Street, between Branch and Allen, I'll say, we have this kind of uniformly wide right of way. Every now and then there's a little extra piece of width as you move to the east. So it does progressively step toward somewhat wider right of way than at Branch Street, but it's in the same ballpark of being pretty uniform, except for this bump.
And Sean, I think that's what we've talked about this whole time too, is that this location is unique. I know I've heard you guys mention before that, everybody'd want to have their signs closer and be put into the right of way so they'd be closer to the road. But how many of them are dealing with this bump out that we're dealing with? That's causing this problem, because if that little bump was shaved off and straight, we wouldn't be having this issue, because that would mean that the adjacent property would be pushed back as well, and we wouldn't have these line of sight issues. So that's why we're kind of at where we're at. So why we're asking you guys kind of treat us as a unique situation.
But there's no building proposed near the bump.
No, but it's what we talked about before about landscaping, anything else, vehicles out there, anything that gets closer to the road. Because I've heard you guys mention before, it's on private property. We can't really prevent them from doing stuff, like putting in their own monument sign. So,
and that's a problem really, no matter who you are, is to some degree, your neighbor could do things that are inconvenient to you, no matter what. I mean, if you,
I guess we're just asking to lessen that impact.
If you put your sign right in this corner and your neighbor put their sign right in this corner, we'd be dealing with exactly the same issue. So everything comes down to some
right,
angle.
Except that there's a catch basin right there.
Okay. So they'll put their sign further away. I don't know, but everyone's got a neighbor.
Who's going to be doing, if this goes forward, who's going to be talking directly with the state? If we I don't want to make extra work for Sean, because we've got him booked for other things, but I can see both sides of the argument that this is kind of a special case where I think we could fend off some of the other calls that would come in saying, well, what do you mean you're allowing some property to be bought from the state to become private property or private ownership? You can say, well, they had a very specific circumstance. On the other hand, I can see the other argument, like you said, Sean, that we don't want to open this up to basically be a free-for-all for everybody on every property saying, well, then I want to buy property from the state too. I just want to get 5 feet closer to the road. So who's going to be doing the hard work of contacting and working through this 6 month to 1 year process with the state?
That really is a negotiation between the property owner and the state. When we've done this on Parmenter Street, because that was a pretty similar situation where the state rebuilt old Highway 12 and turned it into local Parmenter Street, and then jurisdictionally transferred it to us. And they said, if at some point the city finds that there's excess right-of-way here, you can let us know, and then we'll work with the interested property owners to allow them to purchase it and turn it into private land. at which point they can create a survey map and roll it into their property and narrow your right of way. So there is some staff time, but we don't do the property acquisition negotiation. That's between the property owner and the state, not the city. We have to
Sure.
declare it excess and we have to track its eventual survey.
But we do have to declare it as excess property, correct?
We do, because what we don't want is neighbors just going straight to the state and saying, I'd like to buy a bunch of property that the city's not currently using, only to find out we had designs for a future right turn lane near an intersection, but no longer have right of way. So the state doesn't want to sell it out from under us. We have to tell them it's excess.
Okay. I think too many times people in city government find reasons to say no rather than yes. I do think that this is, I think this is enough of a different specialized circumstance that, that 5 feet by 20 feet or whatever it is, I don't see that as being a major problem to declare that excess. I do see the problems that I think it was Dan said that pointed out that this is really two businesses here side by side. And I do think the bump out needs to be contiguous. It can't just be a little bump out on your property and then another little bump and then the long bump out on Sonic and down. I think it needs to be a nice straight line there. So
kind of as sketched, so that it would go from the north line of the Scooter's coffee shop up to an extension of the Sonic line.
Sure.
Okay.
And so that is the only other problem I see is that, that if we declare that section excess, I'm not sure what that does to the people buying the Sonic property.
So I'm just looking at the right of way with it. I've got a map view here that shows parcels, and as I look at it, this section of University and headed east towards downtown has a similar width of right of way, fairly, there's 10, 20 feet on either side of the road. But if you head west from this location, around the turn at by the Walgreens there, I think it is.
At Branch Street.
Branch Street. The right of way gets quite a bit narrower.
Yeah, by a
for
lot.
quite a ways, and even narrower still as you continue going west. So I was just thinking if this was to be a 6-lane road, that's precluded. It looks like it might be possible east of Branch Street, but going west of Branch Street, it would never be possible.
No, and west of Branch, we had to make a decision, you'll recall, if we were going to have sort of the median, the two-way left turn lane with some median areas, or bike lanes, because we couldn't have both.
Mm-hmm. And actually the width of the right of way on the other side of the street across from this bump out is one of the wider right of ways. And then as you travel east from immediately across the street, traveling east, it starts to get narrower again. But then the same side of the street as this proposed business gets wider. Then it's jogging back and forth as it goes. From like the net width perspective, it seems to flow with the with the overall pattern.
So
I can share this if you want to see it.
I can imagine it, but if you want to share it, I'm willing to make the proposal that we direct Sean and company to what's the phrase here?
Recommend?
Recommend is excess. This,
Yeah, why don't we just do Sean's option 2?
because I can't,
Make a
I
motion to
can't
do
see
Sean's
Sean's option. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I had things up on my screen. Yeah, I would recommend option 2. Again, I want to try to find ways to say yes, to help where I can. I do think that in this particular situation, this truly is excess. We don't have plans for this property, and it's a special circumstance because of the next door neighbor and where their property line is. So I think we can say this is kind of a one-off and move forward with that.
So in other words, just grease the skids, if you will, for negotiations to take place between the property owner and the state for purchase of that hunk of land.
Just say
Owners, by the way.
yes.
Pardon?
It's 2 plural owners.
Plural owners, right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, unless he took it all, he could take it all, even though it's in front of the other property.
I think they would only sell to abutting property owners, though. I don't think they would sell frontage to me in front of your place.
Yeah, okay.
You know, to wrap around.
All right, so Robert, did you make that as a motion?
Yeah, basically Sean's number 2.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that's what we will recommend to the council.
Very good.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, gentlemen, for.
Thanks. Yeah,
Have a
thanks
good
for your
night.
patience. It's
Still here?
been a long ride.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your patience as well.
All right.
we may revisit it in another year or two.
All right.
Um,
All right. Bye-bye.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.
We could put off, Bob, if you'd like, the ordinance amendment for the parking restrictions on Donna Drive. I doubt if it'll take long, but I don't think there's anyone here with interest in that agenda item.
Well, I thought you
I
did, Sean.
am.
Who is?
I am.
Oh, Susan.
I drive that all the time. It needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree that it's not going to take long.
I
So
don't
why
think
don't we
that's gonna
just?
take long
Yeah.
at all. We might as well do it.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So this is really just cleanup. You know, we added a median island on Donna Drive near Spring Grove Court, near where the pedestrian crosswalk is, not far from the curve. And so this parking restriction change would effectively catch up with that, with a slight shift of a bus stop on southbound Donna, where we moved the bus stop location from a driveway apron onto an actual bus stop pad, which is always our preference. And then because on the east side of Donna, we added the median, there was already, as you're effectively eastbound / northbound on Donna Drive, there are 2 lanes. So to form those 2 lanes, we had no parking. Well, this extends that no parking all the way to Spring Grove Court on the east side as well. So it does expand mostly on the west side, but a little bit on the east side, I would say.
I would make a motion that we recommend the proposed ordinance text changes.
Is there a second to the motion?
Yes, Dan.
All right. We have a motion and a second to recommend those ordinance changes. Is there any more discussion of that issue? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will so recommend to the council.
All right. Then we're up to consideration of extra stop control, South Avenue at Middleton Street.
And Sean, thank you for looking into this at my request. We can talk about it if anybody has questions, but I think your report walks through in very clear detail why there's really no driving need to change the current two-way stop sign to an all-way stop sign at Middleton and South. So while I'm the one who kind of pushed Sean to explore this, and I very much appreciate the fact that he did, all indications are that it's not necessary, and there's always the risk of unintended consequences by making a change when you don't need to. So I personally think that the intersection does not currently meet or warrant any type of all-way stop control here.
I have one disagreement with that. And,
Great.
and if I drive that intersection a lot, and I have this, every time I drive it, I think about this, because frankly, when you're going south on Middleton and get to South Avenue, you cannot see the traffic from the left. And the only way to see it is I end up with the full front of my car out in the middle of the intersection in order to see that traffic coming at you. So I think it's a dangerous situation, frankly. And I hold my breath every time I go through there.
I drive that intersection many, many times a week, and it is not a good intersection. It's from that one direction from southbound Middleton Street looking east on South Avenue is not a good situation, but I don't know that the four-way stop would improve it all that much.
There was a lot of talk of speed being part of the issue there, and the stop sign's not the solution for speed.
No.
May I speak? This is Kathy Olson. I'm the alder for this district, and I was brought to my attention by a constituent. And understanding the traffic doesn't warrant it. I also sit on the Pedestrian Bicycle Transit Committee. And this is a unique situation. We have everyone in Fox Ridge, if you're trying to get to downtown, you don't take your bike, or walking down Parmenter isn't advised. Their sidewalks are missing. It's not a good place. And to get with the ponds, to get over to Park or to High Point, it's a convoluted way to go. And there's not one good crossing intersection. When we're trying to encourage people to ride their bikes and to walk, if you want to get kids being able to feel safe on this street, there's not any traffic stop from Park all the way over to Parmenter on this, and it can be used as a cut through if it had to be. But we need to have a good way for people to be able to cross here. And like you said, it's the visibility is very poor.
I don't disagree with that, Kathy, but I think the visibility actually is better if you're a pedestrian, because I walk it all the time too, and you're a little farther out into the intersection, and you can take a step out, and if there's traffic coming, you can take a step back, which isn't always possible if you're driving. But even given that, I don't know that it warrants the.
I just think it would encourage, that would be a much better suited place for people to cross, and to have it set up so it's safer for people, especially with bikes and walkers, and younger people would be able to transverse from Fox Ridge to downtown and vice versa to get to the parks and to the ponds. I just think it would be a huge improvement.
A stop sign there?
A four-way stop there.
Four-way stop?
Mm-hmm. Because Parmenter is not really a way for bicycle, and with the missing sidewalks and stuff, it's tricky. And then people would otherwise have to go all the way over to Park Street to get to a bike lane. And this would be an easy way for people. The road would be okay for biking on there.
Well, you still don't have any you don't have any sidewalks on east side of Middleton.
Correct.
You don't have any
Correct.
sidewalks on the north side of south.
The north side of South, yes.
Yeah. The
All
right.
the northeast
And I'm
side.
directionally challenged, so this is a difficult. So,
It's a marked crosswalk.
and I think I have a constituent on here that would like to speak. He lives there and witnesses all what's going on there.
That's
Is
fine.
that okay?
It's Corey.
Hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going? And I just wanted to start to say I've been back and forth with Sean, and your email, I had to read it 3 or 4 times. There was a lot of information in there, so thank you for all of that. But really, this kind of came about. I moved in 3 years ago, and I have young kids, 4 and 6, and I've known somebody on the street that's lived here a long time, and the neighborhood's starting to flip. So one kind of factor to take into consideration too is there's a lot of more smaller children, specifically at that intersection at this point. And you hit the nail on the head. Speed is an issue. I don't know, and Sean, maybe you can confirm this, but you said that the average speed was around, you said 33 miles an hour. And I know you tried to clarify that with me in an email, which I kind of understood, but the meter itself was placed way down the street on South. It was not at the bottom of the hill, correct?
We try placing those at a reasonable spot so that it captures a rough approach speed to an intersection, but is not too close to a driveway or bus stop, because that can throw off speed counts too. And we tend to report things in an 85th percentile. So it's not an average or a median. It effectively represents the predominant speed of most of the people most of the time are at or lower than that number.
Could that have made a difference if it was measured from the folks coming down the hill versus from the folks coming from Park Street? Because I think that's the problem.
We do measure it in all directions.
Okay, so it was in all directions. Because I think the real thing for me is that you have a 25-mile-an-hour street there, and the blind spot was brought up. I have personally seen 2 cars get totaled at that intersection. And, that's I guess the consequences you're talking about, but, no car should get totaled at a 25-mile-an-hour residential street. The one car that it just happened a few months ago, they hit my neighbor's bird bath so hard, the concrete top of it shot across his yard 10 feet. I mean, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about for speeds in a 25 mile an hour. So, and I think the other thing that's not measured is kind of the almost. I can't tell you how many times I've been in my backyard, my front yard, I hear people honking because, as you say, you have to edge out to see around. And if there's a car on that, it's even worse. So I don't know what the perfect solution is if there isn't, if a stop isn't, decided upon. But, I'm at a point where I don't even like my kids playing in my front yard. If they are, I am sitting at the end of my driveway in a folding chair. And it's just insane. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating to tell you, I've been tailgated down that hill, pulling into my driveway. I had somebody actually almost try to pass me in front of my house. So it's just, I get the Middleton police can put up the, the meter, the speedometer signs or whatever, but, to me, it's just a temporary fix. I don't see how, that's going to help. And to me, it's just not a matter of if, but when is somebody going to get hurt? It's a real concern.
I don't want to discount that. People do get hurt on roads all the time from bad driving.
I live on South, so I live right next door. Everyone knows the house on the corner, the blue house. It's under construction. So I live on just next to him. So I live basically, if you're
up the hill from him.
Yeah, going up the hill. So I live literally right at the bottom of the hill. So, I was shocked when I moved in there. It's been a problem for the past 3 years.
Have you contacted the police department to ask them to actually sit there and monitor that intersection and hand out tickets for speeding? I know there are other parts in the city, for example, Park Street near the swimming pool and Park Lawn. And by having police there frequently, the traffic has slowed down tremendously, and they do stop for that crosswalk.
So the first year I did reach out, I don't really know what came of that. I never saw anything. I guess my question is again on a residential street, is that a good use of police resources? I don't know. I guess I'd let you guys
If it's a
make
busy
the decision on
residential,
that.
if it's a busy residential street, I would suggest that Kathy talk with the chief and see if something can't be done.
Yeah, we could have them come in and set their, for a while. I mean, it goes in streaks though, once it stops.
Well, I'm talking about this for a year or two. It might take that long.
I mean, because I've seen that board that's at the bottom of, is it Allen or is it Century that's been there forever? And I don't know, does that really do anything? Because I still see people speeding down that hill a lot too. I guess that's just where I'm coming from personal experience.
Well, and I think that's always the
Signs,
difficulty.
Boards or no boards, people speed on every street in Middleton. 25 mile an hour speed limits, 35 mile an hour, 45 mile an hour.
Yikes.
Yeah. Any street, it'd only take you a couple of cars to find one that's going too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't respect the stop signs.
That's the other problem.
I just want to interject. I think more people respect the stop signs than not. Let's be, I think that if you have a stop sign, there are roll throughs, yes, but I think that it has.
Yeah. I get a lot of calls of folks who slow down, but that seems to upset folks even more than the speeding. Like, well, now that you have a stop sign there, come make them stop, and it's just not possible.
Do you think that would be the point though? Is if gosh, roll through the stop sign and risk a ticket, but you kind of hit the nail on the head. They slow down.
They do slow down, and then that becomes the next question. I think at root, what the problem becomes is we're trying to fix something on a road to make drivers behave a certain way, because across the city, people want four-way stop signs at every intersection, and speeding is a big concern. But the more stop signs we put up doesn't necessarily mitigate crashes. I live on a fairly busy street myself, and I have been passed on the right while turning into my own driveway with my blinker on. That doesn't mean the road somehow is at fault. That means that Yahoo, who made a really poor decision and risked my safety, made a bad decision. And I can't stop that. People do what people do. I can say that when I'm looking at warrants, because those are the tools I have to evaluate what are our real problem areas, this one just doesn't have many crashes like other intersections do. The speeding is a concern in one direction out of the four, but not an outlier compared to many of the other intersections that I look at.
John, I was having trouble. I was trying to find out from your 2010 memo to 2020 how much traffic has increased over those 10 years. And I couldn't figure it out. I don't know.
It really hasn't.
Okay.
I mean, don't you find that a little hard to believe with the University Avenue project that it should have increased a little bit? I guess
University Avenue is not under construction now. So
no, but it was. I mean, that just surprises me because I even noticed the uptick just from living there.
Yeah.
You're saying when they did the readings on the number of vehicles, was it under construction?
In 2017, the easterly part, east of Park Street, was under construction.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We're out measuring traffic for 1 week. We picked the wrong week. That could happen. So we try to pay attention to, is school in session? Because that matters. But it really hasn't moved much in 10 years.
I just also wanted to comment that I did receive an email in support of the four-way stop from the John Schaefer, who lives on the corner of South and Middleton on the northeast corner. So
one with the offending retaining wall.
Yes. found it too. He said he's.
Well, yeah, it is less than desirable. You know, we try to measure 2 vision points. One is if you're just stopped behind the stop bar, which is pretty far back, that's really our best case scenario. And then you have to pull forward. Can you see from there? And even that's not great if there's stuff piled up in the terrace or a car parked. You know, some days, because we pull out there too all the time. Our staff parking lot is on Terrace Avenue. So to get almost anywhere, we're coming through that intersection, southbound. So we go through there quite often as staff. And it's not my favorite intersection. It just doesn't, I'm trying to fairly apply the same warrants as I would for any other intersection. And that's how I drew my conclusion. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. These are just measurable things that I look at just to be fair. So there's always the potential that there are other issues from a neighborhood or policy perspective that outweigh our warrants. I don't tend to look at them. I can't use a stop sign to address speed control, or we'd have stop signs every 30 feet.
If a stop sign's not the, you know, the answer, then really what is? Like, how do you get people to slow down? I know we've talked about speed bumps, for instance. You know, what is the answer?
Speed bumps are traffic control devices in general. Speed bumps are one of them, but they can help mitigate what I would call excessive speeding in our policy, which is more than 10 miles above the posted limit. So those going 35 and above, we tend to be able to bring down from a percentage basis, but it's not the kind of silver bullet where folks who are going 29 suddenly start going 25. That we don't see. And they also have a relatively limited effect. So the more we build those things in series, like when you get out to North High Point Road and you'll see kind of 3 of them in a row, that tends to have a better, longer effect than just putting one of them someplace. Because as much as people will grind their teeth and complain about having to slow down, they'll make up for it someplace else. And we've measured that too.
Because I think the thing is if it's decided against, the thing I would like to see is an accurate average measurement of those coming down the hill. You know, that I think that would be more telling than the data that we have here.
Well, and that's the thing. Whatever spot we pick, there's a different speed someplace else. So what's the sweet spot? I think where we had people walking across the street or traffic rolling across the street at an intersection, that's where we're trying to measure that approach speed. But if there's a hill half a block away, does that translate into the intersection danger? So maybe we're a little bit away from the hill because what we're really interested in is how fast are people approaching the intersection.
But I guess that's where I'm at, is like the sidewalk side is on my side.
Yeah.
So there's a house in between my driveway and that sidewalk, and there was no measurement in that area, which is really the problem. That's the area that I brought this whole, I brought it forward because of that. So if you measure it 3 blocks down the street, they've already rolled out, at that point. God, I would love it if somebody would just hit their brake when they come down that hill. It would solve everything, but nobody does.
Right, we could remeasure speeds at a different place. We were trying to study this intersection, so we were trying to get the approaches to the intersection.
Sean, if I were to ask for some police to come and monitor for speeders, would you do that at the same time that you would put in for counting, or would that skew it? Because, yeah, okay.
Yeah, if people see a cop, they behave.
Yeah.
The cop leaves.
So
that'd be counterproductive, I would think.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering. I just wanted to know what comes first.
Yeah, we try not to measure stuff either while speed boards are up, because frankly, I don't know that people mitigate or moderate their speed much because of speed display boards, but just in case they do, we try not to get data out of that.
Okay, well, what should we do first then? Well, we'll wait for a motion, I guess.
All right, well, committee, do we have a motion of any sort here?
Sure. This is Robert. I'm just a little worried because I drive through this going northbound and southbound primarily on this road quite often based on where I live. And I think the fear or the concern is that putting an always stop here will not actually stop the people going east or west. And then those of us who are going north and south on this road will have a false sense of security that, hey, everybody's supposed to stop. And I will have stopped because I'm used to stopping there, but I'm going to trust that I can pull out into that intersection and the person coming down the hill or going up, is gunning it to go up the hill, will ignore their sign and plow right into me. And I think that's the concern or the unintended consequence that this always stop here could bring. So I would make a motion to stick with the current signage and not to change it to an always stop.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay.
Hey,
Nay.
So that's Bob and Carl opposed?
Bob and Carl voted nay. So the motion carries.
4-2
I think we
then.
could proceed to see if we can maybe get some police monitoring somehow near the bottom of that hill, just to see how fast the traffic is going down the hill.
Before you put out a speed counter, correct, Sean? You want to do?
I think, yeah, police are going to be a better first tool.
Okay. All right, I will reach out to them and ask them to do something, and then we'll see. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Next agenda item.
Yeah, so we just have two things left, and they're both related. Let me get through some of this here first. Shield your eyes if you have vertigo. All right, Gary Huth is with us tonight. He's our Assistant Director of Public Works, Assistant City Engineer. He has been shepherding the Pleasant View Road reconstruction project. And we're up to the point finally where we need to get the state to commit to actually funding the construction. So that's going to be our state municipal agreement. Everything federal funding wise is tied to that. Secondarily, but in conjunction with that, because it's a multi-jurisdictional project from a local perspective, we need to reach an agreement with the city of Madison for them to reimburse to the city of Middleton their share of the first phase of project costs, so that when we're building this, we're sort of running a three-party agreement with two agreements, each of which is two-party, if that makes sense. So the first and more important of the two is getting a state municipal agreement online, but we don't want to do that without there being a City of Madison, City of Middleton agreement in place.
Sean, just for our reference here, what is the committee's role on these? Just simply to make a recommendation to the council to enter into these agreements? That would be our function here?
It is, right. So we'll recommend to the Finance Committee and Common Council entering into these agreements. And Gary has suggested contingent upon satisfaction of the city attorney, of course. And
I assume
also,
these are both fairly standard formats for these kind of agreements?
For what they do, I would say yes. For the state municipal one, it's very boilerplate from their perspective. Even Madison Middleton's, I think probably has the look like it was drafted by Madison. It's pretty boilerplate for them to reach intergovernmental agreements with other local jurisdictions.
Okay.
So it had a lot of the same terms that I'm used to seeing in Madison contracts or Dane County contracts for intermunicipal stuff.
Well, that's what I assumed when I read them. I didn't think we had much leeway for making any changes in these things, so.
If you noticed something, I would say it's negotiable at the city level, but the city-state level one is probably not very negotiable.
Okay.
This is Robert. I thought they both look good, so I'll make a motion to recommend the state municipal agreement to the Common Council, subject to city attorney changes.
Okay, and I think it should also be contingent upon either approval or execution of the intergovernmental agreement with Madison. So we're not hanging ourselves out there and suddenly our legs are swept out on a payback from Madison.
That's a good plan. I was assuming that I would also recommend the others, but you're right, that we should recommend contingent upon the Madison Middleton agreement, intergovernmental agreement.
Okay, and does the committee have a preference or care one way or the other, as I phrased this in minutes, whether that's approval of the intergovernmental agreement? So as soon as Madison's Common Council says, yeah, we're in, or execution, which is going to take a little bit longer.
Can we wait? Can we wait for execution?
Gary, can we wait? What's our timeline on this?
We don't have an exact timeline, but the state has been pushing us for most of the summer and a little more antsy about their pushing since August. They cannot create a project ID until they have a signed agreement in their hands. And so in theory, the greater the delay, there's some rising risk. I think it's pretty low, but it may be actual, even if it is low, that the funding could go away if we don't hit the DOT timeline. And they're pretty rigid about that, but I don't have a specific drop dead date for this. I would think if we got this done by sometime in October, I think we'd be all right. But sooner in October is better.
Sure. Gary, when do the negotiations start with the intergovernmental agreement with Madison? Do you think you can get them and us in agreement by mid-October?
I do. Sean said, as he said, Madison staff actually drafted this. So it's a format that they've used in the past. And staff is in agreement with some edits I suggested. And I also threw on this exhibit to help identify how the cost split was arrived at.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
It could have been built into the agreement, but so as not to put a wrinkle in Madison's format, I thought maybe it would work just as well as an exhibit. It probably would be helpful if Madison could put in an extra sentence. Did he ever get something to you, Sean? A sentence that makes reference to the exhibit? I
didn't, but they will.
Yeah, I'm confident they will. I didn't know if they had it ready for tonight.
Nope, they didn't.
So he was going to bring it to the council October 3rd, I thought, or October 1st. Very early in October, he had Madison's council meeting. But the latest I heard from him is that he was hopeful that he would be able to bring the Middleton signed version of the agreement to the council for their approval. I'm not sure why that would be needed. If they approve it in concept and they don't sign until we sign, that should work, but I don't know exactly how they do things there.
All right, so Robert, if you amended your motion or revised it to say, recommend on execution of these agreements rather than approval of these agreements?
I honestly, actually, I'm steering myself the other way. I trust that Madison and Middleton will get signed, and maybe if we don't wait for execution, we kind of grease the wheels just a little bit to get both of these moving forward. So I would actually maybe amend my own, not amend. My motion would include that we move forward with this upon, Sean, what did you say? What was the opposite of execution?
Approval of the intergovernmental agreement with the city of Madison.
I think just approval is all I really feel like we need today.
All right.
Okay.
And
So
the city
approval of
attorney
the
will have
agreement
something
and-
to say about that too.
Well, it is still subject to the city attorney approval. So if the city attorney says it absolutely needs to be execution, then
Yeah.
then we're back to that.
And we did ask him that question this afternoon, but didn't hear back before leaving for the day. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say based on approval, if the city attorney overrules me, that's what the city attorney has the right to do. So.
Okay.
We have a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. That motion is carried, and that will be our recommendation to the council.
Okay. And then the partner to that is the intergovernmental agreement between Madison and Middleton.
And I also will make the motion to recommend approval of the intergovernmental agreement. Again, probably subject to the city attorney's approval.
And we're also recommending, as Gary alluded, to incorporation of this cost estimate breakdown as an exhibit to that agreement.
That I want that included as well. So that is part of my motion.
Okay.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, Susan, I heard as a second. Any discussion with respect to that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be a recommendation with respect to the intergovernmental agreement. Okay.
Perfect. And that was the end of our agenda. So this is time to adjourn.
We have a motion.
I would move we adjourn.
Second?
This is Robert. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for a long meeting this evening. Thank you,
It was a
Gary,
bit.
for sitting throughout all of that stuff, waiting to get to your moment in the sun here.
And
Thank you, everyone.
I don't know that we have a lot for next time, but we do have an update from Strand Associates on the Pleasant View Road design. So we can look forward to that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.